Hi, I'm Elric. My family planned Thanksgiving without me. Again. No call, no message, just silence. And a public post that tagged everyone but me. But here's what they didn't know. The house they chose for their perfect reunion? It was mine. And worse than being excluded was realizing it wasn't an accident. The letter they hid, the trust they drained, the legacy they tried to rewrite, all without ever saying my name. What kind of family does that? And what happens when the one they erased decides not to stay gone? My parents excluded me from Thanksgiving, then froze when they learned I owned the beach house. The morning sunlight slanted through the blinds in thin, sharp lines across my desk. My studio smelled faintly of dark roast coffee and old pine, an odd comfort that had grown familiar over the years. I sat with a steaming mug in hand, flipping through photo edits from last week's real estate shoot. Just another quiet morning in Charleston. Just another day in the life I built after everything else had been torn down. My phone buzzed on the table, vibrating slightly next to my keyboard. I glanced at the screen. A message from Blake Morton, a high school classmate I hadn't spoken to in years. Hey man, you coming to the big Vexley Thanksgiving thing this year? Should be wild seeing everyone again. I stared at the message. The words blurred for a second, my thumb hovering above the reply field before I set the phone back down. This was the first I'd heard of any family gathering. Nobody had called, no invitation, not even a casual text, just silence. I opened Instagram, Callista's profile. She never was one to keep things subtle. Her latest post was a carousel of smiling faces, fall centerpieces, and one caption written in looping cursive font over a pumpkin-themed background. So excited to have the whole family together again for Thanksgiving. Nothing like traditions to keep the heart full. Tagged were Lucan, his wife, a handful of cousins, even Aunt Cheryl. But not me. Not the youngest son. Not the black sheep. Not the one they'd pushed out a decade ago and decided never to speak of again. I sat back in my chair, the edge of the desk digging into my ribs, suddenly colder than it should have been in the room. The studio was mine, every inch of it, earned. And yet, for a brief, surreal moment, I felt like I was 15 again, sitting in the back row at one of Lucan's award banquets, invisible behind the polished glass of someone else's success. The last Thanksgiving I'd attended had ended in a shouting match and a slammed door. That was 10 years ago. 10 years of growing a business, creating something real, forging a life they never asked about. 10 years. And apparently, I was still so thoroughly deleted from their world that they could plan a whole family event without even a thought to include me. A notification popped up, this time from Jenny, a mutual friend of Callista's. LOL, did you see this? Vexley's went full legacy mode, followed by a link. Curious, I clicked. It was a professionally produced slideshow video. 30 years of Vexley Thanksgivings. Music played over softly fading family photos. Toddlers with mashed potatoes on their faces. Beach house sunrises. Lucan in a cap and gown. Callista's bridal shower. The whole clan, dressed in shades of cream and cranberry, posed under banners, around tables, beside bonfires. I wasn't in a single frame past 2012. The video ended on a graphic, a stylized family tree, with branches for each of my parents' children and their growing families. My name was gone. Not faded. Not misplaced. Gone. It wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. One they had made long ago and kept making, each time they updated a photo, planned a reunion, celebrated an anniversary. I hadn't died. I'd simply been removed. I closed the video player and stared at the blank screen for a long while. No emotion rose, no tears, just absence. A void so familiar it didn't sting anymore. At least not the same way. They didn't forget me, I muttered under my breath, reaching for my notebook. They deleted me. I flipped through the pages until I reached one that had become something of a personal ledger, titled in bold ink, "Things That Are Mine." I uncapped my pen and added a new line beneath a list of clients, completed projects, and milestones. Kiowa House, mine. Story, mine. This Thanksgiving, I choose silence, for now. They think I disappeared. They're about to remember exactly where I've been. They think I disappeared. They're about to remember exactly where I've been. I didn't sleep much that night. My studio felt too quiet, like even the shadows were waiting to hear what I'd do next. By the time the sun started casting pale strips of light across my windows, I was already sipping my second cup of black coffee, staring blankly at my inbox when the call came in. Angela, my property manager, spoke softly but directly, like she always did. "Hey, Elric, we got a full week booking for the beach house, Thanksgiving week." I nodded slowly, already reaching for my notepad. "Client name?" She hesitated, just enough to tell me everything. "It came through a corporate rental service, but the listed contact is Odessa Vexley." I didn't answer at first, just closed my eyes and let the absurdity settle into my chest. My parents, my entire family, had just rented out my house for their family Thanksgiving, and they didn't even know it. Angela cleared her throat. Should I cancel the booking? Every instinct screamed yes. My fingers hovered over my phone. I imagined hitting that red button, cutting them off, keeping the walls intact. No confrontation, no exposure, just erasure, back at them. But then another thought slithered in. If I canceled, they'd never know. If I let it happen, they'd walk into a house they thought they'd found, only to realize later it was mine all along. "No," I said finally. "Don't cancel." I could feel her curiosity buzzing through the silence. "Okay. Anything I should know?" I forced a calm breath. "Just make sure the cameras are online. Common areas only." The cameras had been installed legally months ago for safety reasons. 2 inside, living room and kitchen, 1 facing the porch, all connected to an app on my phone. Normally, I never checked them unless the motion alerts pinged. But this time would be different. I spent the next few days ensuring everything was ready. The sheets were clean, the kitchen stocked with neutral decor. I removed nothing personal, left a few landscape prints on the wall, the coffee table books open to my latest magazine features. Let them sit with the evidence of who I'd become. When the day came, I didn't have to wait long. Just before noon, the first car pulled into the driveway. My phone buzzed. Motion detected. Halden stepped out first, wearing his usual country club beige, and that expression like everything around him needed improvement. I watched as he opened the trunk himself, rare, and unloaded 2 heavy leather suitcases. He paused at the entrance, running his hand along the doorframe as if measuring the craftsmanship with his touch. Then came Odessa, perfectly composed as ever. Her heels clicked crisply against the front steps. She carried a clipboard, of all things. The woman could organize a nuclear summit with that thing. Next was Callista, pushing the door open for Junie, her daughter. The little girl dashed inside, spinning in a circle on the hardwood with delight. "Feels strangely familiar," Callista muttered, scanning the foyer. I raised an eyebrow at the screen. "Close, sister. Closer than you think." They moved through the house, like it belonged to them, commenting, repositioning things. Halden made a face at the modern art above the fireplace. Odessa moved a bowl of lemons from the center of the dining table to the corner. "Too showy," she said aloud. Junie was the only one who truly explored, tiptoeing toward the bookshelf, running her fingers across the spines. She paused in front of a photo I'd taken, a sunset over the marsh. For a moment, I saw her studying it, then glancing toward the window, as if trying to connect the dots, but the adults didn't notice. Or maybe they did and didn't care. When Halden picked up a framed photo on the console, one of the house exterior with my subtle watermark in the corner, he squinted. Then, without a word, turned it around so the image faced the wall. My fist clenched instinctively. Odessa adjusted a vase of tulips I had arranged myself, shifting it slightly to the left. I knew she hated asymmetry, couldn't stand when things didn't balance. I used to think it was just her design preference. Now I saw it for what it was, her need to control everything, down to the position of a flower. From where I sat, miles away but closer than ever, I watched them rearrange my life to fit their comfort. They moved like they owned it, until I reminded myself, I do. They've buried me so deep even their children don't remember the shape of my face. Dinner started the way it always did at Vexley gatherings, overdone, overplanned, and dripping with forced civility. I watched it all unfold from the quiet of my Charleston studio, the live camera feed casting the dining room in perfect clarity. Odessa had gone with white hydrangeas and gold-rimmed plates. Every chair had a place card, and every dish arrived on schedule. It was almost comical how rehearsed it all seemed. They laughed, but it didn't reach their eyes. Halden recounted a story from a business trip like he was headlining a TED Talk. Callista talked about Junie's ballet classes. Lucan bragged about a local board seat he'd landed. Even Arlen, who usually kept to monosyllables, chimed in to praise the growth potential of coastal property. From my end, I poured a glass of red and sat back, watching without expression. I wasn't sure if the wine was dulling the burn in my chest or feeding it. Then it happened. Junie, perched beside Callista and busy spearing a roll with her fork, asked in the clearest voice, "Why isn't Uncle Elric here?" Silence. Real silence. Forks paused. Eyes darted. A few glanced at each other, searching for a cue. Halden cleared his throat. Odessa froze, mid-sip, her lips tightening into a flat line. Callista blinked fast, but said nothing. It was Odessa who finally responded, her voice smooth and rehearsed like every line she'd ever used to explain away what made her uncomfortable. "We don't talk about him during family time." Junie blinked, clearly confused. "But why—" "That's enough," Callista cut in, her tone too sharp for the sweetness of her smile. "Eat your dinner, sweetheart." I flinched, not because it surprised me, but because it was said so casually, like I was a stain on a rug they had long scrubbed out and now refused to acknowledge had ever been there. After the feed cut out for the night, I sat still in my chair. My laptop screen dimmed to black, the echo of those words still rolling around in my head. We don't talk about him. That night, I barely slept. I paced the hardwood of my studio, drank water I didn't need, and sat in front of the fireplace without lighting it. Morning broke gray and cool. I didn't bother with coffee. Angela, the housekeeper, had stopped by for morning cleanup. As she tidied the living room, she found something tucked beneath a couch cushion. A child's drawing. She texted me a photo. Crayons on thick white paper. A house drawn with crooked lines, a sun in the corner, family members with stick arms and exaggerated smiles standing in front. But one figure was different. Smaller, standing outside the house, just behind a window drawn with blue scribbles meant to be glass. No name, no smile. Just me, watching them through the pain. Callista found the drawing minutes later. I saw it on the feed. She glanced at it briefly, her face unreadable. Then, slowly, she folded it and slipped it into her purse. Not a word spoken. I closed the feed, my chest tight with something between heartbreak and rage, not because of the drawing, but because Junie had drawn what she saw, not what she was told. Kids don't lie. They just reflect. That image burned into my brain, and suddenly I was 22 again, sitting alone on the back porch during my last family Thanksgiving. I remembered the smell of cedar from the deck boards, the cold metal of the railing under my hands, the way voices carried from inside. "You either fit in this family or you fade out," Halden had said then, not even lowering his voice. The words were directed at me, even though he was talking to Lucan. I had already started fading, even before I left. I remembered how I kept looking through the window that night, seeing the backs of heads, silhouettes laughing over pie and coffee. My chair had stayed empty, untouched. I was there, and somehow already gone. Now, years later, Junie's crayon world had captured the same truth with the brutal honesty only children possess. I shut the laptop. No rage, no shouting, just stillness. I sat in the dark, staring at the ceiling, the hum of the fridge the only sound in the room. They've buried me so deep even their children don't remember the shape of my face. They thought I was an intruder. But I was just walking into what was always mine. 2 days before Thanksgiving, I woke up with a calm that felt foreign, steady, deliberate, like a current beneath still water. I watched the camera feed as the morning unfolded on the deck. Halden was already stationed at the head of the outdoor table, discussing something with Lucan. Probably real estate or politics. 2 things he assumed I'd never understand. Odessa moved around with her usual air of orchestration, brushing crumbs from a table that hadn't even been used yet. Callista was fussing with Junie's napkin, smoothing it out like the child was about to meet the queen. I slipped on a black button-down and dark jeans, neutral but tailored. No designer labels, nothing showy, just quiet, clean confidence. I tied my watch, grabbed the slim manila folder from my desk, and stepped out the side door of the guest house. The breeze off the coast was soft that morning, brushing the trees just enough to make them whisper. It carried the scent of salt and something familiar, like reclaimed space. I didn't rush, I didn't hesitate. This time I didn't knock. The hardwood under my boots announced my arrival before I even spoke. A few heads turned, confused at first. Then the expression shifted. Callista's fork froze mid-air. Lucan's eyebrows jumped. Odessa's hand jerked, and a crystal wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the deck. Halden's face lost every ounce of color. No one said a word. I stood still for a beat, letting the moment bloom, then walked forward with the same casual grace I used to greet billionaire clients in my studio. "Morning," I said, glancing around the table. "Hope the linens were comfortable. The mattress in the primary suite can be a little stiff if you don't flip it regularly." Halden rose slightly, gripping the arms of his chair like he might push back into it or leap across the table. Maybe both. "Elric," Odessa breathed, her tone rehearsed, like she was trying to sound both surprised and pleasantly tolerant. "We didn't realize you'd be here," I finished, with a small, sharp smile. "Yeah, that's kind of the point." I walked past them, over to the sideboard where a chilled carafe of orange juice sat untouched. I poured a glass slowly, not because I needed it, but because I knew the silence would stretch uncomfortably with every second. "This is my house," I said, "and I figured it was time I joined the family brunch." I placed the folder gently in front of Halden. The Vexley patriarch didn't move. His eyes flicked down but didn't open it. "You might want to look inside." Odessa reached instead, Her fingers trembled just slightly as she pulled out the documents. The first was the deed. Clean, signed, notarized. The second was a glossy, full-page spread from the Architectural Digest cover story. My photo? My studio? My quote beneath the headline, "Redefining Space, One Legacy at a Time." Junie was the only one who smiled. I looked down at her and winked. "Hey, kiddo." Lucan was the first to break the silence. His voice was low, more stunned than accusatory. "How did you afford this?" I met his eyes. No smirk, no superiority, just the simple truth. "By becoming the man you all assumed I couldn't be." No one said a word after that. Forks rested, hands froze mid-reach. Halden didn't move. Odessa closed the folder slowly, like it might detonate if she made the wrong move. Junie leaned into her mom's shoulder, eyes flicking between faces, catching tension she didn't yet understand. But I did. I took another sip of juice, placed the glass down gently, and gave them one more long look. They thought I was an intruder, but I was just walking into what was always mine. They didn't ask any more questions, but I could tell. This wasn't over. The sun had started to shift behind the trees, casting long strips of shadow across the wooden floorboards of the deck. I had left the brunch scene deliberately, walking back through the side entrance into the study, just off the main hallway. I knew it wouldn't take long before someone followed. Sure enough, not 10 minutes later, the door clicked open behind me. Halden stepped in, closing it softly but with that precise finality he used when preparing to issue a verdict. I stood by the bookshelf, pretending to examine an old photograph of the house taken before the remodel. I didn't turn around. "I need to ask you something," he said, his voice low, too even. "How did you come to own this house?" I let the silence hang just long enough. Then I turned. "I bought it." He narrowed his eyes slightly, stepping forward. "Bought it? Or was it transferred? Gifted?" I met his gaze and waited. He didn't blink. "Is there something you're accusing me of?" I asked, voice steady. "I'm trying to understand," he replied carefully. "This place, this level of real estate, it's not something most people your age just stumble into, not unless someone handed it to them." I tilted my head, studying him like a man who just stepped on his own trap. "I didn't stumble," I said. "I built." Odessa appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. She walked in, folded her hands in front of her, and gave me that calm, polished smile that had once turned my childhood into an etiquette boot camp. "Was it someone you knew through work?" she asked. "An older client, perhaps? Someone generous?" Her tone wasn't curious. It was loaded. The kind of tone that suggested scandal, manipulation. Worse. I felt the heat rise behind my ears, but I didn't let it show. I reached for my laptop, flipped it open, and set it gently on the table between us. On the screen was my Architectural Digest cover. A photo of me standing in front of the very house they were now sleeping in. Below the headline, in bold serif font, read, "Designing Legacy: How Elric Rourke Turned Rejection into Real Estate Power." I clicked through to my feature, showing my portfolio, my design studio, my client list, then the business registry, tax records, all bearing my name. Every page documented, certified, public. They leaned in, their faces tight with controlled expression. Odessa's jaw stiffened. Halden cleared his throat. "We weren't questioning your legitimacy," he said. "Just surprised. That's all." I closed the laptop slowly. The sound of it clicking shut felt final, like a courtroom gavel. "No," I said. "You weren't surprised. You were offended." Halden's nostrils flared just slightly, but he didn't speak. "You couldn't imagine I'd build something without you," I went on. "Without your funding. your connections, your approval. That someone could do this outside your version of success felt insulting. Odessa crossed her arms. "We've always wanted you to do well, Elric." I laughed, quiet, sharp. "You wanted me to do what you told me. There's a difference." I leaned in slightly. "This house is mine, earned, paid in full, maintained, renovated, and you're sitting in it because I allowed it. You didn't bring me here. You arrived." The room stilled again. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was defining the terms. They weren't in charge here. I was. And they knew it. I stood straight, looked each of them in the eye, not with anger, but clarity. "From here on," I said, "we speak as equals, or not at all." They didn't ask any more questions. But I could tell, this wasn't over. They taught me to keep quiet. Now silence will be my sharpest blade. After the confrontation in the study, I didn't speak to anyone for the rest of the afternoon. I returned to my studio, closed the door behind me, and let the muffled noise of the house fade into the background. My body was still, but my mind paced like it was searching for a crack in something solid. I didn't feel victorious. I felt cornered. By evening, the light had dimmed, and the coastal fog had begun to creep over the deck outside my window. That's when I saw the email. It came from Reed, my real estate lawyer. The subject line, "Urgent, suspicious offer flagged by title office." I clicked it open, and my stomach went cold. A shell company, Delaney Shores LLC, had attempted to purchase the Kiowa house through a bulk offer sweep. Cash deal. Well below market value. The name on the managing documents? Arlen Cade. He hadn't even tried that hard to hide it. Attached were the filing summaries, contact details, and a transaction draft dated 2 weeks prior. Their timing was intentional. Before the reunion. Before anyone would suspect a thing. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I pulled up the house camera logs and scrolled to mid-afternoon. There they were, Callista and Arlen, walking along the beach path that curved behind the house. No kids, no entourage, just the two of them, talking low. "You know what Dad'll say if this comes out?" she muttered. "He'll thank me if it works," Arlen replied. "We clean it up, get it out of his name. No conflict, no scandal." "It still feels wrong." "It's not wrong. It's reclaiming what was always part of the family. He was never supposed to keep it." That line hit me like a shot through bone. Never supposed to keep it. So that's what I was now. Someone who held on to something too long. Someone who needed to be handled. It wasn't new. Not really. I thought back to 2013, Lucan's first city council run. My trust fund had been quietly siphoned into his campaign expenses under the umbrella of family realignment. I'd been told it was a temporary consolidation for tax purposes. They never take. They just reassign. It was the Vexley way, always neat, always polished, never directly accusatory. It was control disguised as caretaking. I printed out the documents, ownership deed, the offer attempt, the LLC chain. I highlighted Arlen's name, bold and unmistakable, then slipped them into a folder and scrawled across the front, "In case they push." I laid it on the desk, in plain sight. I didn't intend to use it yet, but it needed to exist. Not as a threat, but as a reminder. I wasn't naive anymore. Then I grabbed a sweater and stepped out. The beach was quieter at night, the air sharper. I walked barefoot along the sand, the wind brushing my face clean of heat. The stars had started to emerge, scattered above me like breadcrumb memories. I stood at the waterline and thought about how they had never once asked what this house meant to me, what I had gone through to earn it, how I lived in my car for a month after I left home, how I'd learned to eat noodles 4 different ways, how I'd shot 10 weddings in 2 weeks just to afford the down payment on a camera that still sits in my studio today. They hadn't asked, and now they were planning to take. They used to say, "We're doing this for your good." That was always the line, whether it was redirecting my college fund or erasing me from the family tree. It was never malice, just a convenient reshuffling of assets. And I was always the asset. I inhaled deeply, letting the ocean mist sting my lungs. Control doesn't have to shout. Sometimes it just waits for everyone else to speak first. And then moves last. Back in the studio, I set the folder just slightly crooked on the desk. Not hidden, but not staged. Enough to draw curiosity. Enough to plant a seed. I poured a glass of water, turned off the lights, and let the house grow quiet again. They taught me to keep quiet. Now, silence will be my sharpest blade. For once, I didn't have to fight for the spotlight. They brought it right to my door. I wasn't supposed to be there when he arrived. At least, not visibly. The family had planned a light brunch for some guests that morning. Some extended relatives, an old neighbor from Charleston, and one Mr. Kenner, a real estate investor Halden had known since the Reagan era. I stood near the sliding glass door, just far enough from the group to be forgettable. But not today. The moment Kenner saw me, he lit up like I'd walked out of his stock portfolio. "Wait a second," he said, pointing with a small, excited gasp. "You're the guy from that Architectural Digest spread. Coastal Vision, right? Elric Rourke?" I nodded slowly. Guilty. The entire deck seemed to hold its breath. Halden's smile cracked, a millisecond too late to feel authentic. Odessa's hand froze mid-pour over a mimosa. Callista blinked fast and glanced down at her plate like she was counting her strawberries. "I've followed your work for years," Kenner went on, oblivious to the tension he'd just detonated. "That Sullivan build in Seabrook, your angles on that roofline were genius, and your interiors, you made a prefab feel like a legacy property." I could hear one of the cousins, Junie's older brother, mutter, "Architectural Digest?" under his breath while sneakily typing into his phone. Halden cleared his throat. "Kenner, this is family. We try to keep things light at the table." Kenner blinked. "Well, forgive me. I just didn't realize the prodigal son here was the prodigy behind half the listings in my portfolio." He chuckled. Odessa chuckled too, but her smile didn't move her eyes. "Yes, Elric's had a good few years. We're proud, of course." I didn't correct her. I let the silence do it for me. Later that afternoon, after the last guest had gone and the empty glasses had been quietly whisked inside by someone else, Lucan found me standing on the back porch. The breeze coming off the water had picked up, rattling the edges of the awning above us. He leaned against the railing beside me, his voice low. "I read the article," he said. "Didn't expect to see your face in that magazine. Didn't expect to actually be impressed." I didn't look at him, just nodded. "You did good work," he added. "Real good. You proved us wrong." I didn't thank him. I didn't owe him that. But I heard the crack in his voice, one part surprise, one part shame. Maybe even something close to regret. A tiny olive branch tossed across a broken bridge. Even a half-baked olive branch can feel like a win if it's the only one you've ever been offered. That night, after the house had quieted, I stepped into the hallway to get water from the kitchen. As I passed the study, I heard Odessa's voice from inside. "He's going to make this all about him," she said, cool and sharp as ever. Halden murmured something in return I couldn't catch. I didn't need to. Her tone said enough. It didn't matter what I built. To them, I would always be the one who left, the one who ruined the narrative. I paused in the hallway, fingers tightening around the glass of water. They didn't see a son. They saw a story out of their control. And that terrified them. Back in the studio, I sat by the window, watching the tide roll in. A full moon had begun to rise, casting a silver streak across the surface of the water. I whispered to myself, more to remember than to affirm, I don't need their stage. They're standing on mine. Then I pulled out the folder labeled "In Case They Push" and flipped it open. Tomorrow I'd decide if it was time. For once, I didn't have to fight for the spotlight. They brought it right to my door. For the first time, they were in my house, under my rules, and they knew it. After dinner, I moved through the great room like I wasn't asking permission anymore. My voice was calm, but carried weight. I'd like everyone to join me for a quick meeting. Callista muttered something about it being unnecessary. Odessa sighed audibly. Halden raised one eyebrow, already bracing for dramatics. I didn't flinch. I had arranged the chairs myself, straight rows, no table, nothing to lean on or hide behind. Just an open space facing the fireplace, the flames flickering like the last pretense we hadn't already burned. They came in slowly, one by one. Lucan, with his hands in his pockets. Arlen escorting Callista like she might faint. Odessa sat in the back row, arms crossed. Halden stood until I pointed at a seat. He took it. I stood at the front, hands resting lightly on a wooden stool. I'm not here to be loved, I said. I'm here to be respected. Nobody moved. I'm not asking for apologies. I'm not here to rewrite the past. I'm here to end the performance. No more fake toasts, no more polite theft, no more pretending I don't exist. Odessa shifted in her chair, opening her mouth. I raised my hand. She closed it. You have two choices, I said. You can stay here and treat me as a full person, not as the black sheep, not as the liability, not as a branding problem, but as an adult with his own name, his own house, his own history. I paused. Or you can leave before dawn. That's it. Silence. Halden didn't blink. His jaw clenched so tight I thought I might hear his molars grind. Lucan tugged at his cufflink but said nothing. Callista's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't for me. This ruins everything, she whispered. Arlen placed a hand over hers, that quiet move men make when they're pretending to be anchors but are really just dragging the ship further down. No one stood. No one stormed out. No one defended me. That was fine, because they weren't the audience I was speaking to. I turned toward Junie, sitting on the edge of a couch cushion, hugging a pillow to her chest. She looked like a question mark with big eyes. I knelt down. You always have a seat in my house, I told her, even when there's none left for anyone else. She nodded. No smile. Just that kind of recognition only children and people who've been hurt know how to give. Simple, quiet belief. I stood, nodded once at the room, and walked out. I didn't wait for applause. I didn't wait for anyone to argue or chase me down the hallway with a tissue box and delayed empathy. I left the silence behind me. It followed anyway. Back in my studio, I sat at my desk, opened a fresh page in my notebook, and wrote, Today, I stopped asking for space. I claimed it. Then I closed the book and didn't look back. For the first time, they were in my house, under my rules, and they knew it. The words I needed came a decade too late, but they still found me. The morning after the meeting, I was nursing a second cup of coffee, the kind you drink for ritual more than need. The house had fallen into that awkward silence that follows any public shift in power. People moving slower, voices softer, like tension itself had weight. A gentle knock on the studio door broke the silence. I opened it to find Junie standing there barefoot, holding a yellowed envelope with both hands. I found this, she said quietly, in the bottom drawer of that old chest in the hallway. It says, It's for you. She held it out. My name was written on the front in a hand I hadn't seen in years. Stiff, cursive, clean lines. To Elric, it read. No return address, no fanfare. I thanked her, and she vanished as quietly as she arrived. I sat down at my workbench and stared at the envelope for a full minute before opening it. The paper inside had aged, the ink faded just slightly, but every word struck like a bell. Elric, it began, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to say this in person. I should have done it 100 times before, but I waited. I thought there would be time. It was from my grandfather, dated the very week I left home. You were never invisible to me. I saw the fire they ignored. The way you watched, not just looked. The way you listened without asking to be heard. They called it sensitivity. I called it vision. I paused, my chest tightening. If I could, I'd tell you to leave on your own terms, not in defiance, but in truth. Build the life they'll never imagine. And if one day you wonder if you mattered, remember, I saw you. I always did. I set the letter down, then picked it up again, reread it slowly. Let the weight of each word land, one after the other. That envelope had never reached me. Someone had hidden it. I flashed back to a conversation with Odessa the night I left, her voice cool and matter-of-fact. He left nothing for you, she had said. Best not to linger in false hope. It wasn't just neglect. It was active erasure. This letter, these words, they weren't late. They were buried. I breathed through the ache, letting it expand instead of shoving it down. For once, I didn't brace against it. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I picked up a pen and wrote, not to him, but to myself. A single page. I didn't draft or revise. I didn't stop to correct a word. When I was done, I folded the paper neatly and placed it beside the original envelope on my desk. The last line I had written read, "You don't need their witness to be real." As I sat back, there was another knock, softer this time. Junie peeked her head in. "Are you okay?" I nodded, then surprised both of us by opening my arms. She stepped into the hug. It wasn't dramatic or long or tearful, just real. I whispered, "I am now." The words I needed came a decade too late, but they still found me. They taught me to disappear. I just taught them what happens when I'm seen. The ping came while I was rinsing out my coffee cup. It was the kind of sound you ignore unless you're waiting for something. I wasn't. That's why I turned my head. It was a notification from a real estate industry aggregator I followed out of habit more than interest, mostly for tracking market shifts. The headline read, "The legacy behind the lens, mystery owner of Vexley Beach House identified." My breath paused mid-exhale. The article was written by a lifestyle journalist who covered philanthropic estates and emerging architectural movements in coastal communities. They'd visited Kiowa for a different feature, only to uncover the paper trail behind one of the most talked-about beach homes in the region. And there, centerfold, was a direct quote from my Architectural Digest feature. "I built this for no one's approval but my own, and somehow it became a lighthouse for others." My name was there, clear as glass. I didn't rush to read the whole thing. I let the fact of it sit. Then I heard it. The shift. It wasn't a door slam or a shout. It was the collective hush that comes from voices stopping mid-sentence, like someone had turned down the volume on the whole house. Moments later, Odessa's heels clicked against the hallway floor, the sharp rhythm of someone preparing a speech. She didn't knock. "You orchestrated this," she said, storming into the studio, her voice clipped and controlled. "This is a betrayal." I didn't look up. "No one leaked anything. It's all public record. Truth just arrived ahead of your PR plan." She stood there like she might slap the air. From the living room, I heard Halden bellow, "This is exploitation, misrepresentation, They're dragging our name into their narrative. I walked out with my coffee, leaned on the railing that overlooked the sea. When Halden caught up, red-faced and winded with rage, I calmly pulled my phone from my pocket. "If you'd like to submit a correction," I said, "you'll need the Wi-Fi. The password's taped to the fridge." He looked like he might combust. Instead, he turned and walked out, shoulders tight. That afternoon, I logged into my professional page and posted a single sentence. "Sometimes your name isn't lost. It's just been waiting for the right headline." Within minutes, comments poured in, DMs, referrals. 3 new project inquiries landed in my inbox before I finished reading the thread. People weren't just interested, they were engaged. One user commented, "This house saved my family. We stayed there when we had nowhere else to go. Thank you for building it." Another wrote, "I knew that house had soul. Now I know why." They couldn't bury me anymore. The world had already started digging me up. By twilight, I stood on the balcony again, same cup of coffee now cold in my hand. The sun dipped behind the roofline of the very house they once said I'd never own. The ocean hummed like a witness. And in the hush of that moment, I whispered one word into the breeze. Poetic. They taught me to disappear. I just taught them what happens when I'm seen. Some doors closed that week, but one small one cracked open. And that was enough. Thanksgiving morning arrived with the kind of quiet that feels like both a sigh and a bruise. I woke before the sun, padded into the kitchen, and made coffee in silence. No chairs scraping the floor, no clinking of dishes or casual chatter. The house, for the first time all week, felt still. I stood in the doorway, coffee warming my palms, watching the gray sky shift into light. Through the hallway windows, I caught glimpses of movement, suitcases being rolled out, trunks closing, conversations murmured low enough to avoid echo. The Vexleys were leaving, one by one. Lucan found me by the front door. He didn't linger, didn't apologize. He just extended his hand. "You were right to stay gone," he said. It wasn't an admission, but it was something. I shook his hand. Callista didn't look at me directly, but as Junie ran up to hug me, her mother mouthed the word, "Thank you." No breath behind it, just a whisper of lip movement. I nodded. That was enough. Arlen passed without pause. I didn't expect otherwise. Odessa left a scarf on the couch. Her favorite one. No note, no gesture, just absence where presence had once asserted itself. Then came Halden. He stood outside his car for a long moment, eyes trained on the horizon like it held a better answer than any conversation could. When he finally turned toward me, he said it plainly. "You made your point." There was a pause. "I was wrong," he added, quieter now, "to assume you'd fail." I didn't blink. "You weren't wrong to worry," I replied, "just wrong to erase." He didn't nod, didn't smile, just opened the car door and got in. And then, silence again. As the driveway emptied, I returned to the studio. The morning light stretched long shadows across the floor, and the echo of departure left space that was hard to describe, neither empty nor full. Just true. I opened my sketch pad and sat at my desk. I began to draw. Chairs, the same ones from the night of the meeting, one by one, the stiff posture of obligation in their lines, the rigid spacing, except one, smaller, round-backed, slightly off-center. I circled it. Junie's. That afternoon, after cleaning up the last bits of linen and folding the guest towels, I sent a single message. "Let me know when you want to start your photography lessons." It took less than 5 minutes for the reply. A selfie. Junie, beaming, holding up her new camera. The caption, "Soon." I stared at the photo for a long time. Some doors closed that week, but one small one cracked open. And that was enough. They built their dynasty with erasure. I built my legacy with proof. Thanksgiving evening came wrapped in amber light, soft and warm like a well-worn blanket. The house smelled of roasted squash and fresh bread, the kind of aromas that didn't come from tradition, but from care. This dinner wasn't for them. Not for the ones who left. It was for the ones who stayed. At the table were faces that never asked me to shrink. My assistant, Ava, who had pulled me through deadlines and breakdowns. Marcus, my mentor's cousin, who once told me my blueprints read like poetry. 2 longtime clients who had trusted me with their retirement homes when no one else would. And Junie, now seated beside her babysitter, smiling as she arranged napkins into triangles with great seriousness. The table was simple. No name cards, no curated centerpiece, just clean plates, warm food, and candles that flickered like memory. I lifted my glass. To homes built from scratch, I said, and the people who walk in through the front, not break in through the back. There were quiet chuckles. No one asked for clarification. They all knew. At the end of the table, one chair remained empty. A place I set myself. For him. My grandfather. His letter sat tucked in my pocket, the words pressing gently against my chest. Later, I posted a photo. The dining room in golden light, the mismatched chairs, the food half-eaten, proof that people stayed long enough to enjoy it. The caption read, "They excluded me from Thanksgiving, so I gave thanks somewhere they couldn't reach." Within an hour, the post gained quiet traction. No viral explosion. Just the kind of sharing that came with reverence. Comments like, "This looks like peace." Real family isn't always related. That night, I sat in my studio, the letter from Odessa already opened and resting on the desk. Her handwriting was neat, the paper expensive, her words brief. "We don't know how to be different, but we saw you. Finally." I didn't reply with a letter. I replied with a photo. The deed to the house. Framed. Signed. Hung directly above the mantel. No caption. Just the image. 2 weeks later, Junie came back. She brought her camera, a simple Canon starter kit, the strap too long for her frame. I didn't say much, just handed her a lens cloth and pointed her toward the window. "Capture what they miss," I told her, "and never ask permission to exist." She nodded. That evening, after she left, I stood in the center of my house. The floor beneath me still held their footprints, but my walls echoed differently now, not with accusation, but with presence. This house wasn't just shelter, it was proof. They built their dynasty with erasure. I built my legacy with proof. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop asking to be seen and start living like you already are. I spent too many years trying to earn a seat at someone else's table, waiting for acknowledgement that was never coming. But the truth is, dignity doesn't require permission. Respect isn't granted, it's claimed. When I finally stepped into my own story, I realized something. Legacy isn't about bloodlines or last names. It's about choosing to stand tall in the house you built, even if you had to build it brick by brick with your own hands. So if you've ever been overlooked, erased, or made to feel like your worth depends on their acceptance, let this be your reminder. You are already enough. And now I want to ask you, have you ever had to walk away just to find yourself? Have you ever built something just to prove you could? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story hit home for you. Or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know. And if it didn't connect with you, I respect that too. Let me know why, and let's talk about it. We grow through stories, even when they're not our own. If you found meaning here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter. Because the next story might just be yours.